A summit in Brazil holds promise for the future of Latin America and the Caribbean. For more on that, we go to Stephen Sefton in Esteli, Nicaragua, and Camila Escalante in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Stephen, Camila, it's great to have you here. And I really wanted to talk with you guys about this summit of sorts that took place in Brazil. Some very interesting stuff.
Yeah, and it was a really very important event, Don, because it's part of what, in my opinion, it's part of a global realignment of nations trying to come to terms with the developing realities as a result of China and Russia's decision to go ahead and to go full speed ahead from what it looks like with their efforts to put in place global institutions that are not controlled and dominated by the United States and its allies. And I see Lula's decision. It was Lula da Silva, the president of Brazil's decision to invite the leaders of South America. It was a kind of informal summit of South American leaders. And I see that invitation and the event itself very much as part of this realignment of countries and efforts to define their position in the emerging new world order, if you can put it that way. And also in regional terms, it was very, very important because it marked an absolutely triumphant return to the international scene by Venezuela and Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro. There's so much to talk about in relation to that. I wonder what Camila sees as the most important points.
I don't know. Tell us.
Well, yeah. So President Lula da Silva, of course, invited 12 countries, all the countries of South America, 11 of which were presidents. And Lula shares the view with President Nicolas Maduro that we have to get beyond the ideologization, he says in Spanish, of international relations and relations between countries of South America. He sees this integration of South America as absolutely crucial, a crucial first step towards the ultimate goal of the integration of Latin America and the Caribbean. These are the most populous countries. We're talking about a combined GDP of $4 trillion. 450 million people is the population. So we're heading towards 500 million people. And Lula says that he attributes, the first decade of UNASUR to a greater capacity and an effective forum for resolving disputes between countries. He says that they were able to make and implement cooperation initiatives in the areas of public health, of infrastructure, and defense. And he says that should be possible now. And President Nicolas Maduro agrees. It seems like President Petro agrees as well. Of course, Luis Arce in Bolivia also agrees. Two of the people who actually don't agree and who stood out, and they had words for both Lula and for President Maduro, were Gabriel Boric and Luis Lacalle Pou, the far-right president of Uruguay. So they had their own views on things. They, of course, are falling for the bait put forth by the United States, which is seeking disunity, which has tried everything possible to try to disunite or disrupt this project, the advancement of this project of integration of Latin America. So it seems, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens here forward, because unfortunately we're hearing some voices now in the media criticizing, and in politics as well, criticizing Lula's positions and some of his statements, saying on the one hand he's avoiding Zelensky, and a lot of this comes down to what people, the direction the United States sees for Brazil, for Latin America in terms of supporting NATO and their conflict. And he's avoiding Zelensky. He's not going along with the U.S. line on a number of things. And he's once again reestablishing very quickly those full diplomatic and political and cultural, et cetera, relations with Venezuela. So that's totally illegal as far as Washington's concerned. And Jake Sullivan will probably pick up the phone soon and call Celso Amorim or his foreign minister, Mauro Vieira, and protest it.
Can I just mention? Can I just cut in there? I think it may be helpful for our listeners to explain that UNASUR was set up back in 2008 or 2009, the Union of South American Nations, and it fell apart when, after 2015, 2016, when right-wing governments withdrew from the organization, most importantly under Jair Bolsonaro. So it's really important, as Camila has stated, that they've managed to hold this conference with all those presidents participating and explicitly talking about reinstating UNASUR. And Gustavo Petro made an explicit commitment that he would rejoin UNASUR as president of Colombia. So that's tremendously important.
What's with Boric? I mean, he's not even pretending that he's a lefty now?
Well, and unless correct me if I'm wrong, Camilla, but I'm pretty sure that despite their disparaging remarks, both the president of Uruguay and Boric, the president of Brazil, they agreed
of Chile.
Of Chile. They agreed to stay part of this new process that Lula has put back on track of UNASUR and regional integration for South America. And they've agreed to participate in the contact group that will result from the final agreement of the meeting. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. But I mean, he has come out and said, on the one hand, we have President Nicolas Maduro, who throughout this time said that we need to maintain diplomatic relations with as many countries as possible, healthy, strong relations. Everyone should be able to trade. Everyone should be able to buy and sell products freely, and not have to be living under sanctions, not have to be penalized simply because one country doesn't like the president of another country, or simply because they don't like the ideology or the economic model of that country. And precisely what Lacalle Pou and what Boric are sort of advocating for is, this continued hostility. And really what the hostility is on the part of the United States, Canada, and Europe is the continued, the maintenance of those unilateral coercive measures, those illegal sanctions, which are harming millions, tens of millions of Venezuelans and hundreds of millions of people in other sanctioned countries. That's what they need to be advocating against. And this is a space that Lula has created in which they should have, every single person should have called for the categorical lifting of those sanctions on all South American countries. And really, it's only in this context, Venezuela. They seem to not be wanting to go in that direction. That would be the first step if they're talking about, creating a common trade area and, all sorts of benefits, including some sort of common currency and other things they're hinting at. They need to be talking about the way in which one of these countries, a major important country, is still under assault by those sanctions.
Yeah, it may be worth pointing out that Chile has in fact agreed to open up diplomatic relations that had been cut. And I think they took that decision over the last couple of weeks. And I think you're right about my feeling, Camilla and Don, is that the economic imperative is steadily going to override the ideological ideological kind of remains of the recent resurgence of the right wing across the region. And it's very important that they do so because the Europeans, obviously we know that the United States is married to the Monroe Doctrine, but the Europeans just recently announced a very strong initiative whereby they're going to go on a kind of economic offensive in Latin America. And Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Union, is going to visit Mexico, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil in June as part of that offensive leading up to a summit between the 27 EU nations and all the heads of state and government of the community of Latin American and Caribbean states that hasn't happened for 8 years. The last one was in 2015.
Right.
So it's really important that Lula called this summit in preparation for what is likely to be a very complex and tricky attack from the European Union trying to recover lost ground in the region.
We will be watching that as it develops, of course. Stephen, Camila, thank you so much for your time. Look forward to speaking with you again next week.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.